Well, I got 6 o'clock. Does everyone else have, I know that time says 5:56.
That's off.
That's off, okay, okay. Okay, so I got 6 o'clock and I'm gonna go ahead and call the July 21st, 2020 Board of Trustees, Garden City Community College Board of Trustees meeting to order. And as always, I would just say, since we're doing it via Zoom, we're gonna do roll call and then make sure you announce your name if you're speaking and just for clarification purposes. And on double, we are leading by example here at the board. Garden City Community College has initiated where we're going to be back to school with face masks, and the staff and the faculty are face masks. And so I know it's going to be hard to hear. Hopefully it's not too muffled, but everyone here have masks that work close together. And so anyways, I think it's a step in the right direction, at least, and some accountability that we can keep our students healthy, safe during this time. But I'll go ahead and call it order and just make sure we do a roll call here. This is Blake Wassinger, present.
Shanda Smith, present.
Marilyn Douglas, present. Beth Tedrow, present.
David Rupp, present. Leonard Hitz, present.
Okay. And with that, we'll go into some comments by myself. And first off, kind of a lot's happened over the last month. Of course, we had the endowment auction, and the first time for the endowment auction being online. And actually, I thought went pretty well. I don't know if we have numbers or anything, but I'm sure Jeremy was a little scared on some of those bigger ticket items. I certainly saw some of them didn't jump up till the end, but I think overall seemed to go pretty well. So it was nice to still have something available and a good turnout nonetheless. Couple other things. If you've been following, the tax credits were approved by the state. Dr. Ruda had mentioned that we had put those out. That's approximately $130,000 that were allotted to sell to local businesses for tax incentives for them, and then also gives us some money to do some good things with. So that's exciting. Are you guys already starting selling them? Yep.
Yeah,
So
some pledges.
Yep.
Even.
Yeah. So obviously a kind of a win-win situation there. Little disheartening news, of course. Everyone knows that the sports for fall got moved back to spring, but again, we're academics first, and we need to take care of our kids and students. And besides cross country, everything else will be moved to the spring, and hopefully we'll have a better understanding. And I know it's going to be a weird year for sports and for school in general, but that was brought down by NJCAA, and so we're following that. I know talking to Dr. Ruda, and we've been following with the governor's plan, but it doesn't look like it's necessarily tailored to higher education. And one caveat that we were concerned about, I know Dr. Ruda and I were talking, is the high school students that have a dual credit scenario where they're taking classes here on campus, and how that would affect, because funding and things to Garden City Community College. But it looks like under her order that those students will be able to start those dual credit classes at the college, even though that the high school or K through 12 will be delayed. So that's certainly encouraging. And I know Dr. Ruda and we'll go through, but a little bit more. But just as with masks and everything else, I have to hats off to the administration. They put in a few different programs. I just like to mention that it's accountability, but for all staff and faculty, every day they're having to check in via text symptoms that are related to COVID from the CDC. It's a simple checkbox system. It's actually the same system that the hospital uses, but it reports back, so make sure that they're healthy. And if it doesn't, it gets reported to the administration. They can follow up. And so that's just one more accountability. I think the school is moving in the right direction. Students are going to get something similar to that, but it's going to work through their portal, and a little bit more tailored to the students, but that's coming as well. And then I think that's kind of it. I just, like I said, I would say that as far as colleges and also in education itself, I feel like there's a lot of colleges and education that's just not saying much because they just don't know what's going on yet. And I would say that while we're still uncertain about how it's going to play out, Garden City Community College has definitely moved in the direction that, we want to get students back on campus and we want to make sure that they're safe. And with all this, we're moving forward and letting the public know that we're here and we're going to be open. And so I think that's encouraging to a lot of parents. I think it's encouraging to a lot of students. As of course, you can see that enrollment has started to increase now that we're back on campus. So all good things, and hopefully more to come. So
Like,
yeah.
can I add to what you're
Yeah.
talking about? I've attended a couple meetings with Trish Miller, the college RN, and she has been feverishly working on plans for taking care of the students. So she has policies and procedures in place, which you referred to, but she also has policies for quarantining the students that are coming from international students. She has policies for isolation of positive students. She is going to be the one that'll be going and checking in on these students. Like you mentioned, they have daily check-ins. And we also talked about that any positive student should be seen by a provider. And at first I thought, I don't know if that's necessary, but then thinking about from a trustee point of view and the liability of the college, I thought it was a good policy to put in place.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
she continues to work on that weekly.
Yeah, and Dr. Ruda did say students are going to start checking in this last week of July, is the plan, and some of those will be quarantined for 14 days. And one question that I certainly brought up was, in all this scenario, who's going to be paying for testing, and if students come down with it, who's fronting the cost, and a good partnership with Genesis here in Garden City is going to do all the testing for the students at no cost to the students. So a great partnership there, and that way there doesn't need to be unnecessarily worried that, I don't have the money, I can't get tested, or I'm not telling the truth, or this or that. So like I said, good partnerships to have, and I think, like I said, having the nurse on staff and just medical providers that are helping out, that certainly will give us the best opportunity to take care and minimize exposure, and watch for those trends, hopefully that they don't raise up. So that's all that I have. Kind of a lot, but like I said, a lot's kind of gone on over this last month. It seems it really has changed almost every single day. I think I talked to Dr. Ruda, and it's like, well, now it's this or now it's that. So we roll with the punches, and we'll get through it. Other than that, I know we don't have any new employees, introduction of new employees. So what we'll move into is item number 2 of the discussion of the 2020 and 2021 budget, and of course then go into the approval of the 2021 budget. So Dr. Ruda, if you want to we have a PowerPoint in front of us, and I think you're going to run the PowerPoint as well for everyone else to see.
Andrew's going to pull it up here on the screen.
Okay.
As well.
Okay.
I think those that are out in the Netherlands can see that there as well. I wanted to go through just as a prelude into further discussion and talking points here. I wanted to go through and just provide some overture there that kind of leads into the further discussion there as well. First point being, Andrew, if you could move on to that second slide there, please. I think it's important there just to start by talking about the fact that, we, as a college, have been very diligent and intentional about keeping the cost of education affordable for students. And, this particular graph indicates and shows to you exactly where the combined tuition and fees for Garden City Community College equate and measure against the other 19 community colleges here in Kansas. So I think, again, just in a tribute to conversations and discussions we've had, community colleges were built on access and affordability, access and opportunity. And that's exactly the route that we have gone there based upon our tuition and fee structure, which is one of the 3 legs of funding that we have here at Garden City Community College. So wanted just to kind of go through and show you, kind of a measuring stick there of where we were at least in the state of Kansas, and where that falls as far as on those discussions that we've had there for affordability. So kind of leading into the next slide, wanted to, we had some of this conversation at the budget retreat, but this is an updated revenue and expenses summary. We just want to go through and kind of highlight some things that have changed, as Dr. Wassinger had indicated. As much as everything changes with COVID, everything is changing with budget figures on a daily basis there as well. So just going through revenues, at the budget retreat, we had presented that we were going to be projecting and basing this year's budget on the 15% rescission or loss in enrollment. Since that time there, we've had several conversations administratively and conservatively. We believe it's in our best interest to base this year's budget on a 20% reduction in credit option. Now, preface this and say that this is a conservative number. As of this morning, we were at 22%. In comparison to where we were at last year at this time, that number has changed tremendously just in the 2 weeks that we've been open. So we've actually made improvements by about 11% in the 2 weeks that we've been open. So we anticipate as a college there that we will continue to see that number improve, but we feel like it is in our best interest with all the unknowns that we set that rate, particularly with many of the unknowns that we have with athletic events and different things there as well. It's a moving target. So this is a conservative change in projection from what we had talked about at the budget retreat. Again, just kind of going through on the local taxes and ad valorem. We had some concerns as far as with the oil and gas, what the oil and gas valuation is going to do. However, Finney County is a very progressive community as far as really the building and how it is that the property valuation impacts the overall valuation. And because, even though there was a 57% loss in oil and gas valuation, that was offset by property valuation, for where essentially we were pretty well level for this year on property or local ad valorem as far as property valuation goes. So, all in all there, that is a strength of Finney County and where we are at there in regards to that. And state aid and Senate Bill 155. Again, this is a moving target, and I would start this conversation by saying that we are estimating in many of the conversations that Carl and I have been involved in there with the CFO level and the president's level with the state. The projection that the state is saying that with a $700 to $800 million budget shortfall, there are going to be allotments, there's going to be callbacks. And so our estimates from the conversations that we've had there at the state level at this point there are to estimate on a 10% allotment at some course in time here throughout this fiscal year. So the state aid and SB 155 are showing the estimate of that 10% allotment being indicated. The miscellaneous, is really just based upon interest rates, changes that we've had in interest rates and things of that nature. But only showing a $40,000 difference from FY20 So altogether, total revenues there, we're projecting over $1 million, close to a $1.1 million difference in revenues from FY20 to FY21. Just going down into expenses then, again, we had, at the board retreat, we had conversations and discussions about the fact that we had placed a hiring freeze on positions back in March. And at that point, we had indicated that there were 11 positions that we were not going to be replacing, and they were going to be removed from the budget for this next year. Through additional conversations that we've had here this past month, we have added one of those positions back in. We've had a third athletic trainer. We were going to keep that position open, but we've made the decision that we're going to go ahead and keep that third athletic training position in place here, just for student safety, and just the safety of what it is we're going to have there. So even though we don't have competitions in the fall, we will still be having practices, and we'll still be having strength and conditioning going on. So it's important that when you have over 300 student athletes, we felt like we needed to keep that position in there. The benefits are just reflected with the decrease in the 10 positions there, that the benefits are reflected at the savings that will be had from those positions not being included in this next year's budget. Miscellaneous adjustments of $250,000 will be through personnel and operations, just the savings that we project to have throughout the course of this year. And then our operational accounts, we've already, just in total, among all of our operational budgets, have had a 10% total rescission in the operational budget. So that doesn't mean that line by line there's a 10% cut across operational budgets. This means in the total operational dollars allotted that there's a 10% decrease in that. One thing that I would bring to note there that is I think a highlight from the conversations we had at the budget retreat that is different and reflected within this expenses category is, in credit to Carla, just in the work that she's done there since the budget retreat and going out and working with our insurance carrier, our broker, that we have received an additional insurance carrier for liability that has came forward there with a policy there that does have some benefits for us there. So when we had met there at the budget retreat, we were talking that our deductible was going to be $250,000 for liability, and then our premiums would be $325,000. With this new policy that has came in, our deductibles will be at $5,000. So that is no change from where it is currently. And our premium will be at $108,000. So again, just a tribute to the work that's placed on and kind of being persistent on making sure that we're not accepting the 51st offer that comes to the table or doesn't come to the table there, that we're out looking for the 52nd. So those additional, those savings there will definitely be helpful and benefit the budget that we are pushing forward here. And then enrollment growth is essentially an offset and an offlier there for us to be able to have any types of programs that have increases in enrollment. If there are new programs that we look at bringing on there, it gives us budget authority there for that ability. But just because it's set within the expenses does not mean that the expenses will necessarily come forward there this year. It just gives us an offset there within the budget there for that budget authority. Any additional points here that you want to put forward on that?
Doing good.
So all in all there, then if you take a look at the very bottom left column, between what we project on total revenue and what we foresee as far as the change in expenses from FY21 to FY20 to FY21, we project a budget shortfall of $932,000. So this is very much in line with where we were at the budget retreat. Has not deviated much from when we talked at that time. So I would, Andrew, if you could advance on to the next slide there, please. I wanted to kind of move in and just give you a little bit of an update then, as well, as far as where we have ended FY20 and where our cash reserves are at, both in the general fund as well as capital outlay. So I'm pleased to say, as we talked about at the budget retreat, that we will meet even though we built this year's budget utilizing 2% of our reserves, we are able to end this year with a 21.6% carryover, meeting the board requirement there of the 20% threshold. And our capital outlays will have an ending balance of just over 1.1 million. So again, with the board required ending balance of 250,000 there, then we will be able to end in compliance with the board directives on both general and capital outlay. So I think, the point that I would make with this here and kind of moving into the next slide is that we are being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. I think to further illustrate the taxpayer benefits, I wanted to just bring attention to the economic impact study that Garden City Community College had completed back in March of 2019, because I think there's some very specific points that should be iterated and focused on there to talk about the taxpayer benefits that Garden City Community College brings, not only to this community, but to this region and to the state. So this particular graphic here just kind of highlights several different talking points that I'm going to go through. The first point has to do with student spending. So student spending, $2 million, as was indicated in the economic impact study. Garden City Community College adds over $2 million in income to the Garden City service area economy through students. That's through financial aid, that's through student spending, a $2 million benefit that comes strictly from student spending. Second aspect that I would bring attention there to is the operational impact. As was indicated within the economic impact study, the net impact of the college's operations spending added $14.5 million into the income for this region's economy. The alumni benefit, the net impact of Garden City Community College's students that are currently employed in this region amounted to $60.7 million in the fiscal year 16-17 alone that was used for this particular study. So what I bring attention to there when we're talking about the taxpayer benefits is that for every dollar of public money that's invested in Garden City Community College, taxpayers will receive $1.30 in return, which is a 2.1% return on their investment. I think the points that we illustrate and that we're talking about within this economic impact study, overall, as you can see from just the graphic in the middle, are represented by an overall economic impact of $77.3 million annually that this college contributes to the region economy. So, I preface this by saying that, many of the things that we talk about there, many times are ancillary and we don't really put a definitive number onto it there. But I think, the economic impact study that we take a look at there really begins to take a hardline look at what the impact of bringing 2,000 students to this community are on an annual basis, what the operational impacts and what the overall impact are from the alumni in each of the programs that we have students going out into the workforce in this economy, contributing to this economy. So, I think that's, I think those points are relevant here as we have conversations and move into further discussion on things for tonight there, but a few of the things, Andrew, if you move on to the next slide there, please. A few of the things there, just, as we lead into talking about budget options and, what our path forward is. A few things that I would iterate and talk through there prior to moving into the options. First point being, as all of us are infinitely aware, we are in uncharted times with many unknowns. Each of the three funding legs that we have here at Garden City Community College, with tuition and fees, state funding, and local funding, are at risk. Of particular concern are state budget shortfalls. I had indicated just a point earlier there that the state of Kansas projects a $700 to $800 million budget shortfall in this next fiscal year. With that amount of a shortfall, there will be rescissions and there will be callbacks, and education is not going to be exempt. The other aspect that I would bring to your attention, just as we have these conversations discussed, is that now more than ever, it's important for us to take a look at how it is that we can build reserves. A particular point to that is that with our liability insurance coverage that I indicated to you earlier there, we have seen changes as far as what our deductible and our premiums are. We've seen positive changes for what our deductible and our premiums will be for this next year. However, one point that we're still working on and we're still trying to, Carla's still trying to get some closure on there, is that currently with the coverage that has been disclosed to us, there is an athletic exclusion that is included within this particular liability coverage. So what that means, and Carla can probably explain it better than I can as far as the athletic exclusion.
So basically, the GL coverage is coverage for bodily injury or property damage of others that results out of negligence of the college. That being college lack of policies, bad behavior, catastrophic situations. So in the event that there was an accusation of negligence that related to an athlete or an athletic event, there would not be coverage under the general liability policy. So what does that mean in dollars? In the state of Kansas, there is a tort liability limit of $500,000, $500,000. So basically, you're looking at we would look at a self-insurance model. So we would build that, usually you build things that are going to occur or you expect to occur in your operating budget. Things like a self-insurance situation. You hope that we don't have that situation, but you have to be realistic. And so we would account for that in our reserves. So because, the flip side of that, if we didn't go that avenue and exclude with a liability policy that excluded the athletic portion, you're going to be paying that in premium. And so that's what we were looking at when we had the original quote. You're looking at very high premiums and a very high deductible. So with the occurrence of those, in the history of Garden City, that type of liability has been very, very few. So, I think that in, it's just like if, a roof, you have tornado and hail deductibles, that are different from your other perils. If we lived in an area that we had a lot of tornadoes or a lot of hailstorms, we're gonna probably look at what kind of policy we have versus if we live in an area where, you might have that, but it's not very frequent. So, that being said, like Ryan was saying that, we have operating reserves, but as we look at, as we look at the insurance model that becomes the new normal, we have to make that consideration as well. So just reiterating that, and the importance of, that's why you have reserves, and that just adds another layer to it. So I'll just.
Carla, realistically, I know we talked about the 500,000 as the tort claim, but what other, aspects of attorney involved?
No, we would have
expenses and things like that, so there would be.
Right, we would have an
Obviously.
attorney, yes, we would have defense costs.
Okay, just other costs, not just that.
Right.
And our hope is, like you said, while rare, that it doesn't occur and not be into that premiums every year.
And, I can say, just in the short time I've been at the college, especially in the athletic arena, we're in a much better place as far as our operational aspects and, updates to our athletic training facilities, the additional trainer, just different protocols. So, those are loss control actions that need to happen regardless. And
So is our hope in 3 to 5 years move back to reevaluate that, or?
I don't think, well, it's all driven by the insurance market.
Right.
It's kind of like a few of you might not remember this, but just remember in the old days when we had indemnity health insurance. And, you had a low deductible and it took care of everything. And then we went to this thing called managed care. And, it was just a different model. And it was like, it was a kind of a culture shock. Well, now that's just the type of health insurance that we have. So there is definitely a shift in the market. I don't really, you hope it comes back and it's not so, but the more you read, the less confidence I have in that. Just because they're not, insurance companies are in the market to make money, they have investors. And when you have when we have the climate that we do in, with hazards and weather and social movements and, that's, it's real easy to, with the Me Too movement, all of those things. I'm not saying that they're not real, but it affects the market.
Well, and I don't think, as Carla alluded to, these things aren't unique to Garden City Community College. Just in the past month, there have been several national reports that came out that just nationally at higher education institutions, you're seeing a 20 to 35% increase in spike in property and liability insurance. Now that's attributable to COVID, that's attributable to increases in Title IX and sexual abuse cases, that's attributable to traumatic brain injuries, concussions that you're seeing in athletics. So there's a lot of different factors. So, I preface this by saying that, yes, we've had things that may have impacted our rates that we can look at, but it's not a unique perspective that we're seeing just at Garden City College.
This is David. Is there any single policies out there for that specific coverage?
No, we have coverage we have athletic coverage, which we'll approve tonight, but just a liability coverage, that's a pretty narrow exposure. And so, not that I've been made aware of. I'm not gonna speak that there isn't, but not that our broker has brought forward. It's really hard right now to even place a single, like, if we had to place our auto without other lines, it would have been probably double the cost. And we haven't had any auto losses. You know, it's just the way it is.
Insurance.
You know, so I think, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things, you know, a lot of the things that we've talked about and we put into place, and I'll just particularly bring up, and we'll speak to it here later. But many of the measures that we put into place for athletics are attributing to a $50,000 decrease in our athletic insurance for us next year. So there are things that we have done here that have been very proactive in being able to address and control what's in our control. But many of these factors with liability, property, and different things like that are on a national scale as far as what it is that's contributing to what the rates are going to be. So yes, you have your indicators that impact what your rates are, but you know, much of your property is on a national scale as far as what's impacting it as well.
I'm confused. So we have athletic insurance that takes care of athletes and their injuries. And what is it that we're not gonna have now?
Negligence.
So, okay, so in the, so if we would have had, the GL coverage that that has been offered, and we would have had the unfortunate situation with Braden, then all of those costs would have been paid by the college versus we just paid the $5,000 deductible. And then insurance coverage came in and provided the defense cost and the, I don't think it's final, is it final? No, but then, you know, whatever the settlement is, that, you know, is paid for by our insurance. But that would have been paid for by us. Does that help?
So we're just talking about civil costs or suits, not the actual injury.
Yes,
We have
right.
catastrophic coverage. We have
Yeah, it's just this happened because
And it's-
scenarios,
And it's only related to athletes,
yes.
nothing, not catastrophic weather.
You okay, Ms. Bev?
Oh, yeah. I just kept,
Comfortable?
my foot kept falling in the trash can.
Thank you. Okay, then a follow-up question is, so you alluded to that we're gonna self-fund from our reserves. Are we gonna say then that we want 20% plus X number of dollars for this self-funding account?
I mean, that's one way you could look at it. I mean, the municipal and governmental entities are in the state of Kansas. There's a limit to the liability claim. So, you know, that's, to me, that is a much more manageable self-insurance than if we didn't have that limit, because I mean, you know, it's like, you know, if you have that situation, then you're at the mercy of the jury. And usually if it's going to that far, it's a very sympathetic situation, which, you know, that's unfortunate. And so then I wouldn't be comfortable going down that scenario with damages of unknown. I mean, we don't have the cash basically to responsibly budget that way.
So I hear you saying planning on $500,000 in that account.
Mhm.
Okay.
wouldn't we, as a board or whoever the board is, every year take a look at that? I go back in banking and we had loan loss reserves. You knew you were gonna lose so many loans.
Right.
Every year you transferred money out of your profits into that loan reserve. It grew oftentimes. If it got higher than you thought you were going to need, you had the option of being able to take it out. But I would see this, and I think it's a wise thing for us to do, of being able to every year, as we need, transfer money into this reserve, cover if some kid does die or something, and we've got to pay the whole thing. God forbid that happen, but it's not any different than in a business if you have losses because of depreciation or losses because of obsolescence in merchandise. You have to transfer into reserve to cover that. This is the same situation, only we're dealing with liabilities for kids getting hurt or something else.
Well, and you know, again, just if we know, I mean, just by the nature of athletics, participants are going to get hurt, but this is when, you know, the allegation is we have done something that contributed to that injury, or, you know.
Negligence on a trainer's board.
Right.
So Maryland just put in a number, I think maybe what you're asking there as well is essentially if we would say that we wanted to budget or plan for that 500,000, you're looking at just shy of a 3% additional net reserve.
Okay, I was just trying to figure that out. Thank you.
If all the insurance companies are moving toward that, we gotta move with them and say, okay, they're not gonna cover that anymore, so we're gonna cover ourselves. And we're not gonna be any different than Dodge City or K-State, anybody else. They're all going to have to be doing that.
So are we actually looking at putting
More in research.
into reserves or a separate reserves and keeping it in there? Or is it just a planned for this year, and then if we don't use it and then we plan it for, or are we actually gonna physically put it into an account and say, this is not gonna, like kind of Leonard said, this is money that's gonna stay in there, we'll add to it maybe every year a little bit, get it started funded and stay in there. Then each year, you know, it may not be 500,000. We don't have to plan for 500,000 because we put 500,000 in this year, and go like that. Make it real simple. Is that what we're looking at doing, or are we looking at just kind of planning it, and then if we don't use it, then that's just money that I don't want it to be filtered over to something else. Is what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah, so I would say, like you have in your monitoring reports, or in our monitoring reports, we have a reserve for operating, and then we have a reserve level for capital outlay. And so, you know, if this trend continues, perhaps the board would establish a non-operating reserve that needed to be maintained. You know, I don't, and we don't know, I mean, we're still trying to negotiate to remove that exclusion.
Sure.
You know, we've done, I mean, you know, it's all about, you know, it's a matter of sales. You know, these are the steps that we've taken, XYZ, you know, trying to get them to remove that. They haven't said yes, but they haven't said no yet. So double no. So we're still in negotiation with that.
I think it would be good business for this board to start some kind of a procedure for every year, putting money aside for that. Every year you can make a decision on how much, or if you don't want any at all, you don't have to. But I think it should be something every year that you look at, because, okay, we didn't have any losses this year, but we think we could possibly have some next year, so we might want to put a certain smaller percentage in this year and keep it going. I think it
most,
would be good business. I'm sorry, Shannon.
no, you're fine. Most instances that I've seen of self-insurance, you pay into that account every month, every year, just like you would pay an insurance premium. And that's how you build your reserves for that contingency.
That's exactly right.
And again, this is kind of a unique one because it's not on, we have, if a player gets hurt out there because they get hurt and it's the athletics, we've got coverage for that.
Medical.
This is for negligence. This is wrongdoing on the college part. And then we have to go and defend ourselves or pay out a claim in the civil side of things. So I like what Leonard is saying, and certainly adding to that and having a reserve that's dedicated to that. I do think once you get it up to a degree of amount, say whatever that is, 500, 750,000 or whatever, I do believe you probably don't have to keep funding it every single year, because the chances of actually having one of those civil suits or something like that is still, in all of Garden City's community college history, it's rare. And it's unfortunate if it happens, and it has happened, but no, I think the board can understand that, and I think just having that mindset, I just would rather have something concrete, line item saying this is not to be touched.
Right.
This has to stay here, and it doesn't get filtered over, and just leave it there. So.
And in the bank, if you had a loan loss reserve, that's what it stayed there for.
Right.
And Shanda, to go on with what you're saying, I had farmers who would try to get them to buy hail insurance. Oh no, I self-insure. And that would have been a great idea for them if what you said, every year they took that premium, put it aside, never touched it. They didn't do that. They went ahead and spent the money, and then when they had a hail loss, had a problem.
Yeah. You save that premium every month instead of paying an insurance company, put it aside. So that way that reserve
If
is
you
there.
have the patience and the discipline to do it.
I agree, and I think also you'd have to put the limit up there, 2 to 3 claims. Who knows, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
It's a suit happy world, so.
Yeah.
You build it up there and then let the insurance. Take it.
Yeah, so I think there's several routes that we can go on and figure out where.
Well, it saves us money on the liability side, and like I said, it works in the situation as long as we can fund it and keep diligent on funding it. But I think it's a good method to go, especially for something that is as unique as that situation. It's not like we're trying to self-fund the whole entire liability insurance. So,
Yeah, so I think, unless there's any other questions on that, I think just kind of the last piece then is, really kind of just illustrating or laying out administratively what we came up with there is the 3 options passed forward there for board consideration. So option 1 is essentially taking the $933,000 that we have as the budget gap, funding directly from the 1.873 million increase. This, in turn, would leave our reserves at 21.6%. So, again, if we're talking about trying to be conservative and figuring out how it is that we can build reserves for exactly what we talked about, this would be allowing us to be able to bring forward, carry forward 288,000 towards that end. Option 2 would take our reserves down to 20%. So we would use the 1.6% an overage on reserves and essentially buy down the mill increase to the 1.294. And then option 3 is a hybrid to where we would take reserves to 20.6 and have a mill increase of 1.5. So a couple other points there, and then we can open it up for discussion. But again, just trying to provide some context for what this is there. So down below, you can see examples as far as the increase for homeowners for a $300,000 home. For each of the options, what that would equate to on local ad valorem. And then the next, Andrew, if you go to that last slide. So this last slide, Carla had gone in. So up at the very top, you'll see a 10-year trend history of our mill rate. The first three lines are option 1, option 2, and option 3. They carry over and just give you a summative overview of what that mill increase would be percentage-wise, just for, again, for a contextual reference point there then as well. So this is based upon what we know as far as the valuation. We won't get the final valuation. This is the best guess that we have to go off of there right now. But wanted to at least give you that reference point there for discussion purposes there as well. So that kind of gets us to what it is that we know, all the unknowns. At least kind of gets us some pass forward there for conversation and discussion, and I'm happy to answer and entertain any questions.
I'd like everyone to get a little bit of time in to discuss and go around the table. Maybe if anybody has any, make sure every voice is heard on this, but maybe state your opinions or thoughts or feelings towards any one of the options, or what you feel approaching the 2020-2021 budget as it's presented. So I just want to make sure everyone gets the chance to speak their mind before we make any kind of obviously motion. So anybody like to start?
Well, I'm just kind of comparing what we had at the retreat versus what we have now. And we got this great news of the insurance going down, but yet our gap has increased by 20,000.
Because of the enrollment change that we went from the 15% to 20%.
Okay. So that's a change of 220,000, basically between those two. And the operational accounts, instead of being at 4.9-ish, we're back up to 5.2 on that. Okay. I was just trying to go, wait a minute, we got good news. How did this gap get bigger?
I know one thing pointed out, nobody likes talking about increasing people's taxes. But as it was illustrated too, back at the budget retreat, I think Garden City Community College, certainly before my time, but Garden City Community College has been good stewards of the mill levy. The only one on the 10-year history is you can see highlighted there on that page. It's 2012, where the board took action to actually increase the mill rate. Before that, it was 2003, if that was correct, that I looked back. So there's a growing trend. It's about 9 years, and not to compare to any other college, or everybody else has different problems and different financials, things of that nature. But we certainly are, I would say, an outlier within the community college realm as far as where our mills are, where that we've been good stewards of maintaining. Obviously, we see a little bit like last year, it jumped up, but that wasn't board action. That was just due to evaluations, things like that. So it's not like we're asking all the time to increase. It's hard when all your entities within the county are asking for mill increase, when you get city and school district and county and then the college. To my knowledge, and Dr. Rudy, you can kind of maybe confirm this, we don't have any indication that the other three entities are looking at raising the mill levies. Is that right? That is correct. Okay. And let's be honest, we got hit probably the hardest with COVID-19 when it comes to a taxing entity. I mean, we just did, you know, the school district doesn't seem to be as burdened by it. And you know, there is some stimulus dollars and stuff like that we're maybe hopeful for, but there's no guarantee. And then when we talk about students that were out of town and have to go back, I mean, we definitely got hit hard, and good stewards, regardless of finding reserve money to put back and a lot of things, but you know, it wasn't wasteful spending. But when you get cut on all three of your legs of funding, you got to make it up somewhere. And I think we forget sometimes too the idea of what the community college is to the people of the region or Southwest Kansas. And it's at least up in the state level, it's constantly being discussed, and it's probably been discussed for years, well before my time. But consolidation is always one of those. How do we make up a shortfall in budget, and especially education? Well, you know, you got these community colleges, and that's obviously on the table as far as consolidation. And I'd hate to see. I think we just don't know how good we have it with the college here and what access we have and what it does for our region. I'd hate to see us not be in a position to remain strong within Southwest Kansas, especially when we have two other colleges within an hour drive and a couple others within 2-hour drive. So, and obviously from the impact studies, we know the benefits of the college and how it impacts every single one of us. Whether your kid goes here or whether or not, you know, you directly think that you're impacted by it, you are. So that's, I mean, only my 2 cents. Like I said, nobody likes talking about raising taxes, but when all others are exhausted, when you're removing budget constraint and cutting costs at the budget level and skimping by and doing what you can, everyone kind of has to pitch in, I think. So
I don't want to interrupt, but Andrew just said the papers around here, if we can be a little bit quieter because I can't hear the voices over the papers. Must be a good speaker. It's like when we turn papers.
oh, okay.
I apologize, but he said it's really picking that up.
Okay.
Another question. I noticed we had the same on salaries, both at the budget retreat and now, and we've changed that from precinct 11 and hired and have 10. Is that number with this position that the athletic trainer discussed? Because that number didn't change at all. From retreat when we had a freezing 11 positions to now where it says 10. Is that not including that salary?
It is. So there's actually been a few other positions that have came open there that are going to be offsets of those there. So what we have attributable right now is transparency, bringing the athletic training position that we originally cut back into the budgeted line items there. But there are some additional openings that have came about there that will still keep that net that net difference at the same level.
Okay, so it's kind of a swap out on the positions, not a change in them. Okay.
Yeah.
Questions? Speak up.
I'll go. This is Marilyn Douglas. I think as our board contemplates which direction we're going, we have to have a couple things to keep in mind. Is that we have to prepare for the unknown, and so having enough money to operate is part of that. We have this extra $500,000 that we're going to put into reserves, probably not all in one chunk, but along, I don't know how many years it will take to put that into reserves. We have the unknown about the state reimbursements back to us, or that they're going to take money away from us. The revenue from the property taxes is only 41% of our budget. but it's the most of the budget. So I think this is an opportunity for us to utilize a mill levy increase to ensure adequate funding for the college. The college administration has already made operational cuts across some of their entities. We as a board will be making a decision about our contribution, and that is putting our political reputation out there for increasing tax. But, and then the community will put their share in by paying extra tax. I am in favor of increasing the mill, number one, the 1.873. Initially, when I came into this meeting today, I was gonna choose the 1.5 mill increase, but having heard our situation of trying to increase our reserves to cover for this civil suit self-insurance account, I'm leaning towards that number. And I hate that I have to do that, but I only want to ask once of the public. I don't want to have to come back next year and ask again. So I'm going to ask him for the big money.
I used the example to Dr. Ruda this morning. And, you know, sometimes, and I'm sure in the banking business, you know, sometimes it's easier to ask for $1 million or $10 million than $100,000. And I only say that is let's get what we need and not say to the public, oh, we only need this, and then come back next year and say, oh, we only need this and only need that. Well, that gets really old. And regardless of what everybody's thinking, I'm still, you know, mulling over, but I think it is in good faith that, you know, we be upfront with the public and say, you know, we need this and this is why, and it's for good reason. And
And I think the other point that I would make there too, and kind of going along the lines of what you said there too, Marilyn. These recommendations that we're bringing forward to you aren't being brought forward there because they're the easiest recommendations for us. Politically, from our end,
Yeah.
it doesn't gain us favor to bring any of these three. Doesn't gain any of you favor to have these as a considerations. But as an institution, you know, we've made considerable changes, both the staff, operations, really to the point there where now you begin to start affecting students with any additional cuts. And, so I just wanted that stated there that it's not, you know, we're not looking for the handouts and the easiest options that we're bringing forward there. This has been a considerable amount of discussion for several months on what it is that we can be looking at there for sustainability going forward.
I do have a problem with raising mill levy. I know I wasn't part of the discussion last year, budget, but I was there. We talked about the reserves, having some of those. So if anything happened, I'd like to take that 1.6 out of the reserves, at least some money. I mean, I don't know how many retired people are around here, but we're on fixed incomes. And even though we're one entity, there's, like you said, the other school districts and call it, or the county and the city that we're paying taxes on. So yeah, that $21 or whatever doesn't seem like much, but you add everything else and we're going $200-300 that we're adding to people's tax bills. And so, you know, I used part of the reserves last year because, again, not wanting to say public, you know, we got these in reserve, so we're not going to use it. Well, what about these people that been laid off or had their business closed for 2 months and their incomes are down? How are they gonna pay this? They gonna lose their house now?
I think that this is Leonard Hinson. I think that we're gonna have to raise the mill levy. We're gonna hit resistance from the taxpayers. And that doesn't sound like very much here to say, okay, it's only $2.37 if you go from one to the other, but you kind of add that on top of what they're already paying, it starts to mount up. I think our biggest problem when we communicate this to people is that our sales are down, if you want to look at it that way. We don't have the people coming in. We're trying to keep the college running as best we can, but sales are down. When sales go down, your expenses go on. You can have to find a way of making that up. I think, in my mind, we can't get around right now not raising the mill levy. I personally am inclined to want the 1.5 because of taxpayer resistance. It doesn't sound like as much as 1.873 compared to what we could have done at 1.29. The administration has suggested that that be the option. And assuming that you've studied it long and hard to know that you think the 1.5 mill levy increase will get us by and get us onto the road that we want to be on. And I have to admire and commend you all for the things that you've gone out and raised of grants and things like that to help get us through these things. I don't think you're probably going to stop doing that. I think you're probably going to keep trying to find other ways other than the mill levy to keep funding this college and making it go what it is. One of the big things I know that you're looking at is increased sales, which means translates into attracting more students. And I think that's where our emphasis has been and should be, is sales or more students coming in. The more students coming in, the more economic impact it has on the community. And I understand people being hard pressed if they don't have a job or that's laid off, but that it's going to go up anyway. Every other taxing agency right now is going to ask for a mill levy increase.
Not here.
Cities no.
City, county, and school district are not asking.
Then now would be the time for us to do it.
That's kind of what we were saying. I mean, if we knowingly think that the next other three, as they have indicated, aren't going to, it's not being hit from all four. And you're right. I
But
mean,
we need to blow our horn. We haven't raised mill levy for 9 years. We
I
held
agree.
it. We haven't raised it. The others have. But my mind and what I'm in favor of doing is increasing the mill levy, but in only increasing at 1.5.
Sheena?
And can I ask, Dave, which one were you for? I apologize.
None.
I would be, if any of them, be number 2.
Option 2. Thank you.
To your point, Leonard, the difference between collecting the money from a mill levy from that 41% of our revenue that comes from property taxes, comparing that to trying to collect it from federal grants doesn't match. I mean, that's a lot of grant money that you have to find and apply for and get. So I don't think you can make that assumption that we can recover that money that way. I agree with you that the more you can do with that, yay, go for it.
I wasn't suggesting we recover the money that way. I was saying that we have been doing that, and I know that we're going to keep doing that. What it's going to bring in, I don't know.
Right.
But we'll be looking at other alternatives other than raising the mill levy to keep funding the school. I find no fallacy in what you're saying, but that's not what I was suggesting.
Okay.
Yeah, and and I think to that end, and again, I mean, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It does us no good to sit here and play victim. We have heard from several students there that they're choosing to take what is called a gap year this year, which essentially means that they're going to sit out from high school graduation for a year, go to work, take a year to kind of figure out life, but because of pandemic and everything that's happened, taking what's called a gap year and not rolling in higher ed overall at all. I don't choose to, and I don't think anybody here at this institution is accepting the fact there that we're not going to go out there and hit the pavements hard and go out there and try to figure out how we're going to bring new students in, how we're going to look at bringing new programs in. We're bringing in a carpentry program there that's going to enhance our offerings and enhance our enrollment opportunities. We've put significant investment here just this last month. The board approved a significant advance in our IT infrastructure with network switch. That only propels us to be able to look for new opportunities in distance education and be more responsive to changes when they do happen. So, Leonard, I mean, to your point there, no, we're not going to continue just operating as is. We're not going to quit looking for where new opportunities are out there. There are several new programs that we have in mind there for us to look at as new options for new students that we may not have necessarily been able to recruit in here before. So just because students are saying that gap year is a consideration doesn't mean we're sitting back and accepting that. We're still beating the pavements up until the end of December. We can enroll students here for the fall semester to be able to impact and influence.
We still have prospectors out there.
Absolutely.
I might just make a point. We've got on the page there, it says the annual cost of the mill increase for option 1, 2, 3 at 100,000, and then obviously for a $300,000 home. Not that it makes much difference, but it's a little bit more perspective too, just from Zillow, and I'm not saying that Zillow is 100% accurate, but 165 seems to be the growing trend for Finney County is the average household is 165 average value. So that comes out to be about more or less half of what, so it gives perspective of that average household, 3237 for option 1, 2232 for option 2, 2587 for option 3. Obviously home value is higher and lower than that, but if you're looking at the average across the board, as close to average as you can for every individual homeowner in 67846, that's what more or less what it is. So I kind of have to still side with, I don't see in good faith that I'm a man that thinks the reserve should be higher at any given time. Again, we've talked several discussions. In trying times, that money is going to go away in an instant. I mean, it just does. So anything we can add to that or keep in reserves, the better. I was pretty hard pressed to take away last year, but circumstances dictated that I felt like the college had to fork over some money and step up and not ask the taxpayers. And so when we did take that reserve down, I hounded Dr. Ruda all the time. How are we going to make that up? How are we going to make that up? And so while we have a 1.6 in reserve, to drop it back down to 20, while that does the minimal reserve amount per our policy, I don't really consider that as much of an option, especially when we're looking at trying to fund a $500,000+ self-insured for a catastrophic or for a policy. I have a hard time with the 1.6 and leaving it where it is. I mean, middle of the ground road, like Leonard said, 1.5. I like that. Quite honestly, I think I can justify and defend either way. I think both of them are good. I think, you know, go big, go home kind of scenario and say, yeah, we're going to take this year at the 1.6, keep it in there and ask for the 1.87 mil increase. And, you know, hopefully oil and gas comes back evaluations and next year we're sitting a little prettier and everything from COVID is panned out and we maybe know a little bit more and get back on tracks. But I also think we can do it with the 1.5 increase too. So I'm middle of the road. I know that's, but if I'm leaning towards one right now, I'm definitely leaning towards the 1.5. So.
And every one of these options has a $500,000 built into it, right?
None of them do.
None of them do.
Yeah, none of them do.
One of the reasons I like the 1.5 is because that's what they have told us they think is adequate and they can do the job we're asking them to do with the 1.5. And I think it would be more tolerable to the public, to the taxpayer at a 1.5. We could probably do the 1.8, but I think you're gonna hear more about it.
Well, we've got to be respectful of our neighbors. Their businesses are hurting, their income is down, they're,
Exactly.
you know, so I mean, I think they'll understand, hey, we can't go without anything, but that we're going to try to keep it as slim as we can because we do respect.
And, you know, this is just on the housing side. Commercial is different. Mill increase, I mean, is a little different for commercial, and certainly farmland is a little different too. So something, I mean, you know, there is a little different scenario there. And I think, like I said, people have been hit. This community has been hit, probably not as hard as some of the communities out there as far as, you know, COVID. But definitely been hit. There's not one person that hasn't
You
been
would be
affected.
hard pressed to find a business owner that says their business is not down hand over fist compared to last year.
Right,
So
absolutely.
asking for more.
Maybe some.
Well, yeah, there may be a few, but you know,
No, I'm just-
very, very few.
Yeah, I would agree.
So again, always just wanted to kind of put things in context, just so, you know, we have visuals of things there. So with the 1.5, essentially what we'd be looking at and you know, could have direction there from the board on how we want to do this, but with the 1.5, you would essentially be looking at roughly 100,000 that could be moved into this holding account there for, you know, for liability for the unknowns. The 1.8, you'd be looking at 288. So just trying to put things into context. I mean, I think the prudent thing is that we're trying to take a look at how it is that we can build reserves and be responsive to the things that we know of now and the changes that we're aware of. But just wanted to put it into context there as far as dollar amounts, what that means.
I'd like to share just a little history with you. No one but Beth and I are old enough to remember this, but when I moved to Garden City in 1976, everybody said how fast Garden City was growing. You could fly over seeing it grow, beating Dodge, beating Liberal. And we went along real good until we hit the 80s. Prime went to over 20%. We had houses we couldn't sell. We had places for rent. Nobody would rent. You remember that, don't you, Beth? I don't know that, I'm not a doomsdayer, but I am saying that we don't know what the future is. And I see things on the horizon that I don't really like, that kind of make me remember back in those days. And if we can do what we're doing with a 1.5 mil increase, instead of more than that, going along with David's thoughts, I think we're doing the community more of a service by holding it as near as we can and accomplish what you folks tell us you need to continue running the school.
So Leonard, I didn't hear them say 1.5. Did you guys say that?
That's the one they recommended in the memo.
No, we did not say that tonight.
No,
or what
we
we
did
put in
not.
I think
Is that not why you read it?
what we had said in last week's memo.
Right,
that was
in the memo, it was in the memo.
This is Beth. I like what Marilyn says. I also think that what Leonard is saying is probably the best, because I think next year, nobody's gonna remember that we're not asking for a raise again, and maybe they will, I don't know. I know what you're saying, Marilyn. And I, you know, if we had a good view, or, you know, I'd say let's do it. But I think we're gonna take a hit with the community if we go that high.
Well, and hopefully next year enrollment numbers have helped recover and that revenue has helped recover. So the necessity of so much extra from the mill hopefully will be improved at that point in time. So hopefully this is a one-off scenario that we're quite this disparate.
If it was any other year, I'd go with Maryland in a minute,
Well,
or
I guess
30 seconds.
the other question to ask and everyone think about is it, if the run of the 1.5 is maybe the most middle ground, obviously, we know that. But what's the harder question to ask? Take 1.5 this year and come back and ask for more next year in the possibility that we need it. Or take the bigger hit this year and say, hey, things are doing good next year, and saying, no, we don't need it. Versus, 2 years and a mill increase is a lot harder than one big
Yeah,
mill increase, even if it's same amount. I really do. I mean,
I honestly, because we don't know what the environment holds for us, I'd rather go back to them and say, hey, we were as conservative as we could be, but things didn't change like we hoped. I would rather do that and say, man, we're trying to keep it as tight as we can for you, but we can't predict this, and I don't want to take advantage of that situation and take more than we need.
Right.
If this does recover by this time next year.
I guess I would just remind you all that we will still be putting ourselves at risk for having to pay a $500,000 something next year out of nothing in a budget. And if we put $288,000 in that account, then at least we have over 50% of it. So we are, even with the 1.8, we're still assuming some risk here. And we, as stewards of the community, need to think of that as well.
and you all thought this was gonna be easy.
Who thought that?
Any other comments? Any clarification by Dr. Ruda or Carla, or?
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion that we approve option number 1 for the 2021 budget, increasing the mill levy 1.873.
Okay, I have a motion for option number 1. Do I have a second? I'll second it. And so now we'll take a vote. All those in favor for option number 1, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
So roll call, this is Blake, nay.
Shanda, nay.
Marilyn, yes.
Beth? Nay.
David, nay.
Leonard, no.
Can I
Um,
ask again, did you say, I thought you went,
Nay.
yes, okay, so we're changing that then, okay.
okay,
No, it's okay. That's what we're about.
I know what you're saying, and I just don't think this is the year we can do it.
I'll make a motion for, that we approve option number 3, which increases the mill levy by 1.5 and leaves a reserve of 20.6 for the 2021 budget. I have a motion. Does anybody
I'll
second it?
second it.
Beth seconds it. We'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll do a roll call. This is Blake, aye.
Shanda, aye.
Marilyn, I.
Beth, aye.
David, nay.
Leonard, yes.
Okay, we have a motion to pass for option number 3. That's a increase of the mill of 1.5 with the reserves of 20.6. Okay.
Like before.
Yeah, there is a signature. Everyone, Carly, if you want to pass it around, it will require everyone to sign at the bottom. And then that gets published. And then we'll have, it'll be posted, is that right, to the paper or have, and before next board meeting.
Yeah, prior to next board meeting, there's a hearing.
And maybe a side note, I know Dr. Ruda, Dr. Ruda and I were discussing, just in light of still everything with the surge of flare-up of COVID and the unknowns right now, without overexposing the rooms and things like that. It's our recommendation that we just keep with the meetings as they are right now, just minimize exposure and still having everyone access via Zoom so that nobody doesn't feel uncomfortable that they can't show up or vice versa. And until we know a little bit more about what's going on with reopening the school and meetings.
The chairs are nicer.
Chairs are nicer, a little more comfortable.
Priorities.
Okay. So now we'll move on to the consent agenda, item number 3. Has everybody had a chance to look over the consent agenda? Anybody would like anything removed from the consent agenda for further discussion?
I'd like to set out item D1, D2, and D3 just for better understanding.
Have a motion to remove items D1 through D3. Anything else? Get a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. Or I guess, no, sorry about, can I get a motion to approve items A through C, removing D1 through 3 for further discussion?
I so move that items A through C be approved.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda A through C as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, roll call. This is Blake, aye.
Shanda, I.
Marilyn, yes.
Beth, aye.
David, yes.
Leonard, yes.
Okay, and then we'll move into discussion for the D1, 2, and 3. Leonard, what's questions?
Well, I was just wanting it set out to have a little more explanation from Carla and Ryan, just a brief explanation of what changes, if anything, in the property insurance. We've covered most of this already, and maybe my motion wasn't necessary. I had set it out before, but if you could just give a real quick synopsis of D1, D2, and D3, I would appreciate that.
Sure. Regarding the property insurance, on page 30, there's a comparison of the premiums per line. One of the things that, again, is a little bit challenging is on the liability side, we were with Wright, was the insurance company. All of the various liabilities were bundled. So when they non-renewed the liability, not every company writes all of those coverages. So for instance, a professional liability and your sexual abuse, those were, and your educator's liability, those were all bundled into one product. So property, nationwide property and automobile premiums are increasing, just market driven. And I would also like to point out that the brokers, are understand our situation. They appreciate our business. We haven't received any less services from them, but they did reduce their broker fee this year. So, any questions, further questions on property or any comments? The other two are the good news, the good things to present. We've been very fortunate that our work comp mod has been, continues to decrease. We saw a slight decrease in the work comp rates, and and so thus a small decrease in the premium. We, like I said, when it comes to that, we're just, I think we, all of our departments, work hard to make sure that our employees have the work tools that they need to minimize work comp claims, safety gear, those type of things. So that's pretty short story there. And then on our athletic insurance, the same thing. This is the insurance that we have is the first level is designed to be a secondary insurance. So the students' families insurance, if they get injured, it comes in first, and then this picks up whatever is due after that. Oftentimes, just because of the nature of our student athletes, I mean, no fault, but our student athletes really can't control what their parents do. We have considered looking at a product that would give our student athletes primary coverage. It's cost prohibitive individually as a school because there isn't enough spread of risk. We have been presented several times with a scenario that if all of the 19 schools would go together, then it would be an affordable product for the institutions to provide that stable primary coverage. It's been presented, and that's all I can say. I mean, there are a couple schools who build that into their fees, but again, you're looking at like a minimum of $500 per athlete, and when and that's just like I said, that's just a hard chunk to chew off. So we haven't looked at that. Now, one of the things that I think it has attested to this past year is the diligence in the athletic department with the athletic trainers, also the strength and conditioning coach. I mean, it's been, it's shown in our losses, very, I didn't put all of that information in the packet because it doesn't duplicate very well, but I will share with you that traditionally, you can see this. I apologize for the people on the Zoom, but the red are the claims. So in 2015-16, the red is that we had a real spike in claims, and then we've had a decline in claims, and thus that shows in your premium. And last year was just an incredible year. Again, I think it's in our approach that we have taken with partnering with health providers in the community, using tools like Healthy Roster that is a communications tool between the student's family, their care circle, the providers, so that there's support for those student athletes to get well so that they can participate. But so with all of that together, you see a decline in the premium. The one thing I will say that we did change is in the catastrophic coverage. We didn't change the level of coverage. The only thing we changed is the benefit period. Prior to this year, we have had a undefined benefit period. So if somebody got hurt this year and they still had problems 20 years from now, there would still be coverage up to that 5 million limit. Looking at our trends, et cetera, we cut our premium in half by going to a 10-year benefit period. So that's some decisions that we made here. So ultimately, with our claims and our shortening the benefit period to 10 years, we were able to save almost $51,000. Is that clarified for you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carla. So do I have a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda, item D?
I'll make a motion to approve item D1, D2, and D3.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Roll call, this is Blake, yes.
Shanda, aye.
Marilyn, yes.
Beth, yes.
David, yes.
Leonard, yes.
All right, moving on. Confirmation of monitoring reports. If you guys want to turn to your board packets, I believe it starts on page 33. We'll go through the first one is the academic advancement of the ends. The students desiring academic achievement will be prepared for successful transfer to other colleges and universities. 1, students will have appropriate knowledge of transfer requirements. 2, students will have the academic prerequisites sufficient for successful transfer. And 3, students will have the opportunities for general or for advanced degrees. And of course, the CEO's interpretation for each one of those is set forth with a lot of data. Hopefully everyone got a chance to read, but I would just add that, I think you guys have been doing a tremendous job at the state level. Each year it gets better and better transferring to university level. Each year it seems like there's less and less confusion from parents, from students not taking classes that won't transfer or communication with the universities. So And having that opportunity, because as we talk about, some students start off at the community college level, maybe thinking that they just want that associate degree, but then when they get here, they learn that college is a little different than K through 12 or high school, and they push themselves, and then they do find that they want to move on. So I obviously the data behind it is pretty self-sufficient there, but anybody have any comments or questions?
Yeah, this is Marilyn. I would just comment that the student evaluation that's conducted is kind of misleading in that the scores are about, did you get some counseling and advice in regards to your courses and what you need to graduate. But part of that is on the student to attend the counseling sessions. And so if they don't attend the sessions, then we get marked down for that. And it's really not the counselor's problem. What I like about the explanation is the constant evaluation of the process and trying to make it better. The idea of trying to go online will help. But I did have one other question to ask about, this always comes up when we have this discussion, the transfer of credits. The question becomes whether a algebra credit is an algebra credit and whether a government credit is a government credit, or is it a humanities. And so how do you do all that?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, and then I'll defer to you, Mark, there, if you want to correct me on anything that I misspeak on. But I think to your point there, Marilyn, one of the things that we've done at the state level for really the past 3-4 years is working towards making system-wide transfer and putting system-wide transfer in place. So, you know, each year we've increased the number of courses that essentially have system-wide transfer, which means that if you take English 1 at Garden City, that is going to transfer and equate to English 1 at Fort Hays, at K-State, at Wichita State, Dodge City Community College. So, you know, part of the problem that we've had in the past up until putting the system-wide transfer in place was exactly what you're speaking to. You could take an English 1 at Garden City, but it may not be an equivalent at the transfer institutions you're coming into, or they may have different degree requirements at those institutions. So, you know, by having this system-wide transfer, I think we're up to 82, 84 courses that in the state of Kansas, regardless of the institution you transfer to, those credits are going to transfer in directly as that course at those institutions. And so, Mark, I don't know if you have anything additional on that.
No, I mean, I think that really covers it. And as is included in that report, right now the work at the state level has been focused very much on this course-to-course transfer. So that English 1 is English 1 here at Dodge City down the road, at Fort Hays, at KU. There is a movement now at the Board of Regents level to articulate programs across the state, which will further improve the transferability that students experience when they go from here to a 4-year public university. And that's explained just very briefly in that report, but it is an improvement. Right now, we do program-to-program articulation between our programs at Garden City and programs at institutions across the state. Each one of those is a separate negotiation. We negotiate each of our programs from Garden City to Fort Hays. With this movement behind a program or a statewide program-to-program transfer agreement, that would dramatically improve and reduce the amount of work that's required to set up and maintain those transfer agreements. So I am very excited about that and look to be involved with that at the state level to further improve that transferability that you spoke of.
Mark, are you aware, are there any other classes that you guys know of that do not transfer very well? And what do you do when you find one of those?
It really varies by institution. And so on a course by course level, one example is in agriculture at K-State. The agriculture department at K-State is very justifiably proud of the work that they do. And so we will communicate directly with that school, our faculty directly with their faculty to make sure that the course is acceptable for that school. So that's one example of what we do. I'm not sure if that fully answered your question.
No, I appreciate that you guys are acknowledging that that happens and that you're trying to work on it. That's all we can ask for.
Yeah, and
Yeah, Marilyn, sorry, Mark.
No, please go ahead, Colin.
No, Marilyn, before you had asked that question, and that's a comment that I was going to make, we do have a very robust academic advising system. So not only do our academic advisors, which is in the academic, which is in the Student and Community Services Center, but with all of our faculty members that advise, they are experts in their areas. So if you have a business major and they're questioning on, what part of my business classes will transfer, well, most of the time your business advisor, which is a faculty member, they will have that answer. And if not, they're going to help the student reach out to that next institution of their choice and make sure they do get the right answers, so they're not taking classes that they don't need at Garden City Community College.
Great.
I think the only other thing that I would say to that though is, Marilyn there, so when we run into those classes that, may have transfer issues at some institutions, that's the purpose of the Transfer and Articulation Council at the state level. So the reason why we've been able to get to 84 classes or courses that transfer system-wide is for that very reason. If we were running into an issue with microbiology in the past, we're going to propose and have our faculty take microbiology as a course to present for system-wide transfer. So as we run into those there, every year there's a select group of courses that are evaluated, but then you can also propose additional ones to be reviewed as well.
Okay. I appreciate you guys' diligence on that, because we hear that in the community about credits that don't transfer to what you want them to be.
Any other?
I was gonna say, this, I kind of remember this from
Yeah, you used to
from
report on
a
this.
few years ago. Anyway, it's, as you look at the statistics, it's one thing to lead a horse to water. It's another thing to make them drink, right? And so I think it's interesting, how often do you use the academic advising? Out of 3, it's only half. How often do you talk? Well, that's a little higher, but how satisfied are you with, if they don't use them, they're not going to be satisfied. And they won't say anything until they go, and then until they go to a college or university and they experience problems. Another thing that happens that I think the students sometimes forget, if you change your major, particularly when you get to the 4-year school, that's going to cause a few problems. So I think, as we did it, and I know it's still there, every course in our catalog, we had across how it would transfer to Fortes and Emporia State, KU, K-State. And if the kiddo would work with their advisor, they'd know this. I know one of the things that causes problems is the remedial courses. There is no way. I remember working on a special case that we required all of our students to have college algebra for the Associate in Science, Associate in Arts. We had a young man that was transferring to a Far East school, and they called me back and they said, we consider college algebra remedial. You've got to get him in trigonometry. Semester had already started. We had an instructor that took the young man, got him caught up, and he graduated with the trigonometry. So I think, I know there are concerns, but for the most part, if the student gets with the advisor and that advisor contacts the school, I would say 7, 8, 9 out of 10, they can be adjusted. So I commend you for continuing, Colin and Mark, with the advising program. We just got to make sure our students agree.
I have I have one comment I'd like to make there, and it kind of goes along with what Colin has said, and what's also included in the report, that we continue to work on strengthening advising, and we've made some shifts to prioritize that. I think that the data shows that students have a largely positive experience. They largely recognize the value of it. We're continuing to work on strengthening it, even though we've had those positive results, because we know that it's so important. And we certainly hit the transfer issue very hard from our side. It's a massive statewide system. It's not perfect. And one of the problems that we face is we also hear of these students who have had issues upon transfer, but at that point, they're not talking to us anymore. And we have the ability to, especially when courses are on that system-wide transfer list, we have the ability ourselves and through the Transfer and Articulation Council at KBOR to help advocate for those students. But it's so difficult for us to know who they are because they've transferred on and they're at Fort Hays now and they're working with the advisors there, or at K-State or at KU. So if you hear of those, I mean, that's something that would be wonderful to through your ownership linkage conversations to send that message back out, that we can also help advocate for those students if they've had experiences with things that aren't transferring as they should.
Yeah, I think the last point that I would make there, just kind of, to both the credits, but I wanted to highlight just one piece in here though too is, I think it's important when we take a look at this here, that it's not just one specific assessment tool that we're using in order to gauge information off this. We're taking both indirect and not direct assessments. We're taking some anecdotal information that's given to us there through feedback. But we have very specific assessment tools that we're using and that we put into place here in the last few years here as well. But the one thing that I would say, just if you reference on page 35, is truly when you're taking a look at academic preparation and success of students, much of that is gauged in, does an institution retain the students that they have? Well, the chart on page 35, what I would draw your attention to is a very direct gauge of whether or not an institution is retaining students is the number of hours that they take in order to move on or prior to moving on to another institution. Well, if you take a look at Garden City, our average credits just in the region system alone, our students are transferring with over 50 hours of credits. So, what that says is that they're not just coming here for a semester, not just coming here for a year. They may be taking dual credit classes and coming here, but those students are transferring to the region's institutions close to getting their associate's degree. Maybe we have to work with them to be able to get reverse transfer degrees in place there so they can send hours back from us or to us from these other institutions. But our students are being retained at a high rate there because they're taking 50 hours of credit prior to that transfer process. And, I think that's just, that's a direct correlation of things that I think also go towards determining successful transfer there is the number of hours that they're taking at this institution prior to transfer as well. So I just wanted to give credit to Mark there because I know there's some new data that's been presented this year that hasn't been presented to the board in the past, and I think it will just continue to be refined.
Very good. Any other questions, comments pertaining to that? Nope. Okay. The second one is an annual, and it's the mission statement, probably first and foremost, the most important out of all of ours, but it's the mission of Garden City Community College exists to produce positive contributors to the economic and social well-being of society. Pretty straightforward interpretation, and the interpretation data to define that. Well, pretty powerful statement, but any questions or comments regarding that? No?
No,
Okay.
I like it.
Yep. The next one is the executive limitations. It is the budgeting, financial planning, and forecasting number 1 and 2. Budgeting, financial planning, and forecasting. The president shall not cause or allow budgeting which contains too little information to enable accurate projections of revenue and expenses, separation of capital and operational items, cash flow, and disclosure of planning assumptions. Anybody have any questions or comments? No?
No, I think the information you guys presented this time was
Very
right on,
good,
spot
very
on.
good.
Number 2 of the budgeting, financial planning, and forecasting, the president shall not cause or allow budgeting which does not allow a review of the estimated budget in detail and by department or cost center in both percentage and dollars of expenditures requested compared to previous 2 years of budget requested. Again, the information, any comments towards that? No? We'll move on to the financial conditions, numbers 1, 2, and 3. I'll read all 3 of them, and then if there's any questions on them. Number 1, the president shall not exceed the working budget for the fiscal year July 1st through June 30th. And A, fail to maintain a reserve of at least 20%, and B, fail to maintain the capital improvement fund of at least $250,000. Number 2, the president shall not use cash reserves. And number 3, the president shall not fail to develop additional revenue sources for capital improvement projects. I think Dr. Ruda has done and the administration has done an excellent job this last year, considering everything that has gone on, and that we asked him to dip into reserves. So anybody questions, comments towards those?
So I would just say that by next month, when we talk about this in review, that we'll add a statement on number 1 about the account
yeah.
that we'll need to create,
I
and
think-
hopefully you guys will have the for sure go ahead that we need that at that point.
Yeah, I think so. Any other questions, comments? Okay, and then there's a little caveat to the last one. It was supposed to be number 7 and number 8. Number 7's a biannual, and number 8 is just a yearly or annual report. Dr. Ruda had mentioned this to me, and we're just going to get it on the next month. It was just kind of an oversight, but that's number 8 is basically new programs or removal of programs without the consensus of cost effectiveness. So that he'll report on that next month. But we are going to talk about number 7, which is the president shall not allow for purchases between $10,000 and $50,000 without first giving consideration to local, which is Finney County businesses with a maximum 10% premium. And again, when it falls in that, it's pretty cut dry that we do send those out and give that additional allowance to try to promote local consideration. Any questions or comments regarding those? I will say that there's sometimes, I think we still go out. I don't think there's been an incident, but I know from the public side is sometimes we have to do a bid that's so specific or tailored to something that just doesn't, it doesn't fall in line with a business maybe around here. And so I don't know that it's happened recently, but I know that's always a question is well, why didn't it go out? Or if there's nothing available, obviously we can't do much about it. So anyways, I know they always try to do a good job of getting it out. So that's just a consensus approval. So we'll move on to item B, which is the review of monitoring reports. The first one would be it's actually going to be down at number C, which is the policy governance review, treatment of people, number 5, and then we're going to go into number 1E on the board's job description. But on page 45, Marilyn and I had met with Ryan, and after talk from last board meeting, we talked about the availability of getting community feedback in in another means, you know, if they don't want to email us, or if they don't feel comfortable coming in and speaking to a board member directly, or have maybe can't get to us, that we should make it options for comments, for feedback from the community. And within a short period of time, Dr. Ruda and the administration and staff, they were able to get a form, and I don't know, do we have that up?
Andrew, would you be able to pull that up, please?
But we got a form, and I believe it's going to be posted on, and it may be already posted on, on Garden City Community College's Board of Trustees site, and this is what it looks like. Basically, it requires your name, first and last name, your phone number, an email address, your physical address. Obviously, those first 4 are required, so we have some means of communication back. But as you scroll down, it gives you time occurrence and where location, specific location, involved in parties, like we talked about, and scrolling down. And it is actually a pretty slick way of working. So then going down, I think the caveat to this is it says feedback pertaining to, and it says Garden City Community College president or other. If that individual puts a check mark at Garden City Community College president, that will forward right to me or the chair at the present time, which then will be forwarded out to the board members as directed and discussed within the board, so that a president's issue would be given to the people that basically oversight the president. If other was checked, that would be going to Dr. Ruda or the current president. Not that the board wouldn't be probably advised on that if there's things, but there again, the dealings of the day-to-day operations is within the president, and it gives that opportunity to, you know, if there's something that they really felt like it was only meant for the Board of Trustees' eyes, well, then they have that option, and it will only go to the Board of Trustees. Obviously, please state your comments, feedback. And then I like this last one too. And when this gets submitted, there's files to add to it if supporting documentation. But the response of saying, would you like a follow-up response, yes or no? And then when we get the response back, or if it sends, I think they're going to get it into a PDF format. At first, it was just kind of an email, and it was we did some test runs of it. But clear at the very beginning in bold lettering, it says this person would like a response back, or some kind of response back, or they may not. If it's just a positive feedback of saying something doing great in the community and they don't need a response, then that's great. But it's very clear. It's very, I mean, it's pretty slick the way it is. I haven't seen one with the PDF, but we've ran several tests, and it seems to work really, really well. And I just think it's a really great tool that hopefully the community can utilize, and it's one more option that we can say, we are here, we're ready to listen, we're listening always, and if you have anything, I don't know, can you go quick, just run through and do one, just type in a John Doe or something and just kind of show what that looks like? I don't know if it will come, it probably won't come back. Dr. Ruda, anything, or Marilyn? Anyways, we added under the president's, the fail to address community feedback as the president's site. But as Marilyn and I were also talking about, really, we needed to add something to the board's job description as well. And you can see that being, what did we add it to? We added to
Number E.
Number E. Yeah, so number E on page 46, just added address the electronic communications related to the performance of the president. Again, this is a kind of a two-part, whether it goes to us as a board because it's the president's issue, or if it's within the institution and the president needs to see it. We both need to be following up if it needs to be followed up, or communicating to individual parties. So the wordage is pretty straightforward. Anybody have any questions while Andrew is getting that kind of linked up? But anybody have any questions or comments regarding?
Question I have is, they have a complaint about Dr. Ruda, and where would they send it?
Well,
If they look at Garden City Community College
It's on the-
president, they wouldn't want to send it to him.
no. So
They ought to.
if it's the feedback
Right.
pertaining to, it says pertaining to GCC president. If it's anything regarding the president, that's what they check. If it's if it's about the president, that's what they check, and it will only go to the board. But if it's anything else, then that will go to Dr. Ruda.
I can see that it goes to Dr. Ruda if it's other, but do we have the option of seeing those complaints that come in as other? As a board member,
I mean-
do I have the option of seeing that?
You guys had discussed that he was going to address the board.
Yeah, as addressing to the board, because if those, I mean, and I think we talked as far as Dr. Ruda keeping us advised on those. And again, this isn't necessarily a complaint, this is feedback in general, anything, it were positive or negative. But Dr. Ruda responding back to the board from those, because again, the purpose of anything other than with the president, it really needs to be president driven, and the president needs to take care of it. And now I would say that if it's not getting resolved, they can still go and then make the following comment and saying now it needs to go to the board, because I've sent 1, 2, 3 responses, and President Ruda or any president hasn't responded, and now it needs to go to the board. The other nice thing is with this, it's all a form based,
It's all
and
archived.
it's all linked. So we can go back and do a self audit. Say we haven't heard anything from Dr. Ruda in 12 months, and he keeps saying nope, everything's fine. We can, as a self assessment or going in there, we can say, okay, I want to pull everything that's been commented to Dr. Ruda. And
So it doesn't go away.
it doesn't go away.
It's a record,
It's
so-
there for 7 years, I believe. 7 years.
So what you're telling me is we do have the option of seeing it if we think we want.
We do, yes, if we feel like we need
You
to.
can go in and self-monitor, you can go in and request the information. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It won't be directly sent to you.
Yeah, won't be the day-to-day stuff.
I mean, again, I think, the conversation we've had there, trust is only as good as the individuals that you work with there. I think there has to be that level of trust that you are receiving the information, but there is the right for direct inspection there as well. If you want to be able to go in there and see what reports have been submitted, they're retained and they're reported there for 7 years.
I'm not a great fan of the policy governance, but I do like the fact that the board, the president works for the board, things that are to be handled, go to the president, he handles them. Now, if there's something that beyond that involves you somewhere, it needs to get to the board. I understand that. But that was why I was asking the question, do we have the option, if there are some complaints not related to the president, we have the option of seeing it. I don't want to be out on the street and somebody blindsided me with something that they said or turned in, and I don't know it. I want to know what it's about. I think the board has a responsibility there.
So kind
I
of
don't
a
know.
summary of what feedback you've gotten over
Yeah,
the month, just a
Absolutely.
quick highlight then that way does that sound fair?
I
Yeah,
don't-
I would say though,
Yeah.
that it's not our job to answer for
For
the
the
president
Right.
to that individual about what's going on. I would say, if you saw something in the ledger that you didn't like, you go
I'm not
talk to him
suggesting that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's what I kind of thought you were acting in for a person that made a complaint to you.
Well,
That happens.
And your response is, you can look at it, but you go to the president for them to help it.
I mean, I don't know
To
that this
resolve
form prevents
Don't.
being blindsided, although I believe in you can never over communicate. I think it's better and you will always get over communication from the standpoint of what I'm conveying.
And I don't envision that happening with you, Ryan. I have all the trust in the world in you. I don't envision that. That you might not be here forever and this board won't be here forever.
Yeah.
There'll be other people come along.
Yeah.
And they may not understand the governance the way
Right.
we understand it.
So
Yeah, I
you,
think what this form does is it puts one additional layer for communication, one additional layer for transparency. You know, so it's one additional means to where, yes, you have email, yes, you have phone. Yes, I can come into the office, but now I also have a form I can fill out online there to be able to convey this.
Well, if I have somebody ask me something, I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to come to you.
I think it's eliminating those that say, I don't have a form to be able to take concerns, joys, anything forward. I think this eliminates or helps to further eliminate the fact that they say, I don't have access to the board to take issues forward. I don't have access to the college to take issues forward. What is my route? Well, this is one additional route.
well, and we want to hear good news too.
Yeah.
And that's why we said, this is feedback. I mean, if we're doing something right, administration or board, we want to hear about it. And sometimes it's not something that you're going to go out of your way to come in and tell Dr. Ruda or one of the board members, say, hey, you guys are doing a good job on this or that. But it's, 9 o'clock at night and you're sitting around and saying, hey, you know what, I can submit a little form and say, you guys are doing great, or I don't agree with you on this, whatever, but at least we have some, and then again, we have documentation coming back and saying, this is what we're trying to reach out. So,
The email there after you sent that thing.
oh, did it go to other or? Yeah, so I got notification, and basically, I don't know. So I'll pass it around and it comes in a email format, but then a PDF is attached to it. This is just one of them. And that says user would like a response right at the very beginning, clear as day, where the other one, if it doesn't have that, but it has all the information and also a PDF generated form. I think it's pretty slick.
And I think it just illustrates, this is real time.
Yeah.
There is no delay.
Yeah.
The information being conveyed, and this is real time on submission. So we receive it there right away on email.
Right. It's,
Well, and I think people feel less shuffled around and lost in the,
right.
it went through, not did this person get it to the right person
Well, it's very straightforward. I think, it's an easy form. Yes, we're requiring you to put your name and some contact information, mostly because we need to follow up with somebody. And even if you don't, I think accountability. So, it's not just 100 John Does being submitted or something like that. But I do think, did it go through? I do think it'll be a handy tool, and I think I hope we get some user response from it. I really do. But anyways,
I like it too because it's the avenue of choice that we want to hear from people, not Twitter,
Yeah.
not Facebook,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, you guys, here's your avenue. Let's use it.
and we can have some real life discussions
Yeah.
on things and
It's
topics.
another form of ownership linkage.
Well, absolutely,
Yeah.
and it gives it just that flexibility. So I like I said, I think.
So if the board is good with this there, then we'll post this week, we'll place it on the board's website, webpage, and be live there this week.
So it's gonna be a tab or
tab.
a link.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have a lot of comments about
Yeah. So we'll still have our emails. There'll still be the email. So individual emails can be emailed or for the whole board. That doesn't go away. This is just one other avenue. So anyways, everyone good with that? Okay with that? And then the wordage on those. So
Let's, do we need just a consensus
I think you want just a consensus, huh?
to,
Well,
because we're adding to the.
I think we should probably, let's do it doesn't hurt. Yeah, do a vote. So I need a motion for item C1 C1 of the treatment of people, number 5, add it to the president's side, and then the number 1E of the board's job description.
I make a motion that we accept the additions to policy governance treatment of people, number 5 as stated, and board job description 1E as stated.
I second that motion.
They have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so this is Blake, aye.
Shanda, aye.
Marilyn, yes.
Beth, yes.
David, yes.
Leonard, yes.
Okay, and then the review of monitoring reports, oh, I guess I skipped that, sorry. B1 and B2, that's in your policy governance booklet, what we touched on last time, the annual executive limitations asset protection number 5.
So I have, it's on page 14 and 15 in the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
And on both of those, it's pretty straightforward language, and I don't have any recommendations for changes unless you guys do.
Anybody? Anybody have any, are okay with the language? Yep. Okay. Good, Leonard? Yeah. Okay, Shanda, okay, yep, okay, perfect. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, other open comments from the public. Do we have anybody sign up?
No, we did not.
No? Okay. Item B, President's Report, Dr. Ruda?
Yeah, I will go through and just touch on a few things. You know, as has been mentioned there, we have transitioned back to reopening campus offices as of July 6th. So staff are back in the office. One of the things is we'll kind of talk through here just for a minute as far as enrollment. Summer enrollment, summer semesters are nearing an end, but we've seen positive enrollment figures from this summer. As of this morning, we're approximately up 2% in credit hours over last year. So, you know, again, I think a lot of that's attributable just to ongoing marketing efforts. Dedicated faculty and staff have been working through that there, and obviously the reduced tuition rate there helps some with being online for the summer and changing our tuition structure for the summer. But very pleased with where we're at this summer. As far as fall, based on figures as of this morning, we're approximately 22%. However, this is an 11% interchange. Good, essentially reopen. I think we anticipate that we will continue to see over the next month there leading into the start of the fall semester. There will be positive changes happen with enrollment, but I just wanted to update you on where we're at there with that. As far as the fall semester, you know, Dr. Wassinger indicated that we will start to have students begin coming back to campus next weekend, so July 29th, I believe is the date that we will start having students return to campus. Those students that return there will be those that are going to be quarantining for 2 weeks in the dorms. So our food service contract will start at that time. So we will have essentially full services beginning there next weekend in preparation for the fall semester. With that, Mark and the academic team and faculty have been working on really putting together I would say, multiple modalities that we'll have at our disposal here for the fall semester. So, you know, what's really been worked on there is having fully on-ground classes. These are primarily going to be classes that are in person every day, specifically probably more on the technical side is where you're going to see a lot of this. But then we'll also have 2 different options of what are in our remote. We'll have a Buster online, which is strictly students that are taking classes in the online format. And then we will have what's called the Buster Stream, which is where students are attending classes live through Zoom. So we have updated technology that will be able to have students still be able to see into the live lecture, have asynchronous learning occurring on that end. And then we have hybrid options where students will be able to attend in person some days and then alternating between Zoom there as well. And then some enhanced and some stream flex options. So again, there's going to be various modalities that are going to be in place. And I think, you know, what that speaks to there is really just the way that education is going to be transforming as we go forward. But I think the other side of it there is positions us very well to where if we have to move to an online environment or to a remote environment going forward, such as we did there this last spring. We're much more well-positioned and in place there for that transition if it needs to occur. Just a couple of updates. We talked about CARES, the CARES Act funding, stimulus funding. Just wanted to give you guys an update that on the student side, we've had $641,000 that was allocated to be awarded to students. To date, as of this morning, we have awarded $635,535 to 730 students. So just a tremendous job by financial aid and business office, being able to get those dollars and those monies pushed out to students for what it was intended for through the stimulus funds. A couple of high points that I just wanted to touch on there as well. Patsy Zeller had reported this week on the nursing, both the PN and the RN within the state licensure. Our practical nursing, which consists of 26 students, have all passed their board exams. So we had 100% completion there, and they're now fully licensed. Of those, all but one will be transitioning into the RN program.
Wow. Awesome.
Great. In addition, on the RN side, all but one student has passed their board exams, and they will be completing, they'll be taking that test again. Once that student passes there, then they would have a 90% completion rate there for this past year. So again, just a tremendous job in the face of adversity there, and having to transfer to online nursing is not an ideal situation for a learning environment. So kudos to the nursing faculty and Patsy for the leadership on that end. As far as industrial maintenance, we have submitted our final draft for both the certificate and the degree program for industrial maintenance to the Board of Regents. So this will be going through the program approval process and be presented to TEA in August and to the full Board of Regents in September for approval. So by September 9th and 10th at the state meetings, they're going to have to have full approval for industrial maintenance certificate and degrees in place there at that time. And then the last piece of just good news that it came across there yesterday, the Garden City Community College volleyball is one of only 32 programs nationally in the NJCAA ranks that was honored this past week by the American Volleyball Coaches Association as a 2019-20 all-academic team. Now what that means is that in order to fall into this area, the team, not individuals, but the team must maintain a 3.3 or higher for the academic term, or for the academic year, so for the entire year. Our volleyball team had a 3.55 GPA. So, you know, just kudos to each of the student athletes, Coach Hiltz. Additionally, there were also 5 volleyball student athletes that were recognized individually for NJCAA academic honors as well. So great representation of student athletes and strong qualities in the classroom as well.
Very good. It's always good to hear. Moving on to C, incidental information. Again, always provided a lot of information there. For your reading, any comments, questions regarding the incidental information? No? Finney County Economic Development.
Not much to report, but just getting back into the office and getting started again.
Okay.
And meeting tomorrow.
Okay. KCCT, Beth?
We have not had a meeting, but I did have a correspondence from Heather Morgan, the executive director, and the executive board met, and some decisions have been made that I want you to be aware of. Effective July 1st, the KACCT vacated their offices. It was on the 10th floor of the Jayhawk Tower, and that was larger than they needed. So they moved into to the second floor. The office is 204, it has 204 square feet on the second floor, which makes it considerably more economical for us. Mailing address has changed. I won't take time to do that because I gave it to, Amy. And she can give it to you. The number has changed. It's Heather's cell. And again, Amy has that. Julie Halling has been the administrative assistant for over 5 years. She will be leaving in mid-September. The administrative support needs have significantly been diminished in the last few years. Will not reduce any of the KACCT services, but it will definitely result in additional cost savings to the organization. Julie will be taking significant vacation, but she will also in helping finish the year-end audit. So if you would like to provide a note of support to Julie, need to do that by August 1st. Next meeting is scheduled for August 29th and the 30th, maybe, at Pratt Community College. We don't know if we're Zooming yet or not. That's all I have, but those are changes I thought everybody should know about.
Very good. And report from SGA, no report from SGA. Report from Faculty Senate. We have
We have Nicole.
Nicole.
Possibly Perla, who will be transitioning in as the faculty senate president.
You.
She won't. She won't serve.
And Andrew, do we have her on the line there at all?
Yeah, she's coming on now. Sorry about that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, guys.
Oh,
Hi.
So yeah, this will be my last official meeting in front of you guys as a faculty senate president. I will say that every year a new president's coming in, so Perla Salazar will be the president next year. If you don't know Perla, she's amazing. She's on SLAT, so she's got lots of information about our assessment, up-to-date information about that. She's been teaching, I think she's going to her 5th year, and she's a math teacher for us, so she's pretty awesome. If you haven't met Perla, you'll like her a lot. Senate still hasn't met since May, but a couple just updates about faculty are basically things everyone said already. We're working a lot of extra time this summer, even if we're not teaching a summer class, just on preparing for fall with the new modalities that Mark's talked about. There's a lot of just decisions and learning and things to think about, or how it's best going to be looking for our students there. So we've had some trainings this week, some virtual trainings this week. There were 2 sessions today by Sean Glassberg, and we have 1 more on Thursday. Jamie Gerler has been still an excellent resource in just answering questions and helping out. We've been enrolling students, like that's been mentioned too. And I know you guys talked earlier about just advising. There has been a big change, it feels like, just since we went online with this, and just not only in our processes, but just in how we incorporate faculty into the advising process. And I know that there's still going to be a lot of changes and a long ways to go, but I think that the changes in the direction we're headed is good. Just like I think Mark or Colin mentioned, for who it was, that faculty do know a lot about how their classes transfer and what the students will need other places. And so I think I speak for all of us when I say we want to be involved in that, so that we could help the students when they're making decisions about classes to take. Yeah, those are all. Oh, I was gonna make one more comment. I said follow up on system-wide transfer. When you guys talk about transferring classes there, brought up that every year classes are looked at to see how they transfer there, and faculty have a big role in that. So like, for example, last year math or science and math looked at astronomy and physics and I think trigonometry, and we had our teachers in those fields be a part of those conversations, whether it was virtual conversations or actually in place. So I know that all of our faculty are involved in those too. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one, Nicole. I have heard from some of my patients fears that teachers have for going back into the classroom because of COVID. Have you heard any of those fears, and how do you answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter where you teach or what your job is, there's always going to be some fears when there's so many unknowns. I haven't heard anything that's abnormal from what I think any other school is probably going through. I know some teachers are very happy that the college is mandating masks. I know some teachers maybe aren't. There has been discussions just within our building of, well, can we wear a face shield instead or in addition to, like, what other things can we do there? But I think that our administration does a really good job of just supporting and answering those questions. When we initially were talking about modalities for the fall, the stream option wasn't one of them. But when issues came up with people, our, Phil and Mark said, well, this could be something that we offer too. So yeah, there's been fears. Has there been anything unreasonable? Not that I've heard of, but I think that everyone's handling it pretty well. People are, I don't know, everyone seems to be being pretty fair about it and pretty realistic about what we can do about it.
Good, good. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Just like to say thanks for stepping up and being president for Faculty Senate, and a great job, obviously, accolades and just congratulations, and then you'll be missed as president.
Well, thanks. It's okay. Pearl is pretty awesome. You won't miss me. She's pretty amazing.
Very good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Before we get to ownership linkage, I'll just go over the upcoming calendar dates. August 10th, faculty returns with an all employees in service. Again, the 11th of August is our Board of Trustees. There's we initially planned on going back to the Beth Tedrow Center, having it in the endowment room, but as constraints and things are, we feel it prudent to just keep it as it is for right now until we know more. So it'll be actually held still via Zoom, and the board will meet here in the conference room, and we'll make sure we get that correction and make sure everyone is aware of that. So so no surprises there. August 14th, new student orientation, and classes begin August 17th.
Actually, our new student orientation is going to be transitioning online, so we can get students oriented and familiar with things there prior. So
Okay.
we won't be having a face-to-face there this year. We won't be changing the format and structure.
Okay. All right. Very good. And now back up to ownership linkage. Anyone comments from public? Anybody would like to share anything? No?
Already shared it all.
Yeah, I know. Yep. Yep. And there is no executive session slated for this evening, so I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Amy, I just went blank.
Oh, that's all right.
I think it's the muscle relaxation. I read my directions. It said I could take one every 12 hours, so I thought, you guys are.